Hi, everyone, and welcome to our lesson following up on our watering science campus urban farm training and talking specifically about watering calculations and how to water. So, how much to water? So, in terms of campus urban farm watering, again, we've created this really nice watering chart for you that scientifically breaks down how much water should be applied to a particular growing space. And you basically have two options when you're hand watering at the campus urban farm. Either you can use one of our 2 gallon watering cans, those nice green ones, as you can see in the photo there, which already have 2 gallons listed on the side, and that's how much you deliver. Or you can use one of the spray hoses, which are generally 2 gallons per minute if you're to turn it on. So those are your two options when it comes to applying water in this scenario. It's probably similar to what you have at home as well. So when it comes to using the watering can, it's pretty easy because it already has the measurements listed on the side. It only has a 2 gallon capacity. So you can essentially just know that if I fill this all the way with 2 gallons and whatever percentage of fullness is thereafter, again, if you only fill it up halfway, that's only 1 gallon, etc. You can figure that out pretty easily. So just to run this through in terms of just a mental check. So let's theoretically say the watering chart says a raised bed needs 4 gallons of water applied to it. How many times would you need to refill your watering can to water it? Give you a second. But hopefully, if you think about it, and feel free to pause the video if you need more time, hopefully you realize that if it's a 2 gallon watering can, you need to fill it twice because in order to apply 4 gallons, you need to fill it up once, apply your 2 gallons, and then fill it up again and apply another 2 gallons. So hopefully easy enough. Now, when it comes to fractional situations, so let's say if you have a seedling tray that only needs 1 gallon of water applied to that area, how full should your can be? Again, if you need to pause the video and think about it, feel free. But hopefully, after thinking about it, you realize, okay, well, if I wanted to have a gallon that in this 2 gallon bucket, I only need to fill it up halfway. Um, Again, if a native plant only needs a half gallon, how full should your can be? Again, 2 gallons, it only needs to be a quarter full. So you only need to fill it up a fourth of the way. The easy thing about our watering cans is that it actually has the measurements on the side. So even if this is like too much math for you, you can always look at the side of the can and figure out, okay, how full do I need this to be in order to get the water that I need? So fairly simple when using the watering can, but just requires some simple math to process. So the garden hose is a little different because it's not preset. So assuming that it has a 2 gallon per minute distribution of water for a standard spray nozzle in that shower mode, it's more of a function of time. Also, if you're dealing with a different kind of hose or you're not quite sure, that's really delivering 2 gallons of water per minute in a home situation or something like that, you can always test it in a gallon bucket or similarly sized container that you know the measurements for. And you can just time it and figure out, okay, if I hold this down, how many gallons are being filled per minute? And you'll know exactly what that GPM value is. So you have the ability to measure that if that's not preset for you. Now, going back to the concept of watering with the hose, since you know it's delivering 2 gallons per minute, you had to figure out how many minutes to keep spraying. So this is actually a function of time, not volume. So you actually need to do some mental calculations to figure out, okay, well, how long do I hold this hose over this area for? So to help you with that, so let's go through some examples. So if you're checking the watering chart, it says that you must apply 4 gallons of water to a raised bed. So how long or how many minutes would you have to spray that area with the 2 gallon per minute hose to deliver 4 gallons of water to that area? Um, if you do the math, you'll realize, okay, well, if I want to apply 4 gallons of water, I need to be holding that hose and spraying down that area for at least 2 minutes. Because if you basically multiply 2 gallons per minute by 2 minutes, you get 4 gallons. So that's basically how you're able to calculate that. Going through a similar example, so let's say you only need to apply 1 gallon of water to a tray of seedlings. Hopefully you'll realize, okay, well, if I apply, the hose for 30 seconds, that'll deliver me 1 gallon of water. So, basically half of a minute is 30 seconds, half of a minute will deliver 1 gallon, so you're good to go there. And also, similar situations. So what if you only need half a gallon applied to, let's say, a native plant shrub? So divide that even further, and you'll realize, okay, well, to get a half gallon applied, I only need to hold this up here for 15 seconds. So a quarter of a minute. So essentially, I divided my 2 gallons by 4, and I got 15 seconds. So that's how you figure that out. However, one note about timing is that 1 second is always longer than you think. People tend to blow through like, oh yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then like not end up applying enough water. So you really want to be careful about mentally timing based on actually counting this out. So going, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, whatever, 3 alligator, 4 alligator, or even actually practicing with an actual timer to see if you have it down will really help in making sure you apply enough water to the landscape, which is a major problem that most gardeners have. And in terms of final notes, in addition to just being really judicious about making sure you're applying enough water, the posted water schedule that we have available to you at the Campus Urban Farm is based on square foot density, which means that it assumes that 100% of that area that we're lining up for you is fully planted to the brim. So obviously if it's a fairly empty bed, so if there's a lot of bare areas, you don't necessarily need to apply all of that water to all of that area. You only need to apply enough water for those plants. So you can generally skip over the blank areas unless there's actually seeds actively under the soil, which will hopefully have been labeled and called out to you before doing that. And if you're in a scenario like that, where maybe something's already been harvested and only half the bed is full, you can essentially just divide the space that you're given into a smaller area. So if you look at the watering chart, a lot of it's based on the typical 4x4 raised bed situation. So if going back to that example, if only half the bed is planted, you can easily say, well, this is only half the area, so I can divide that water requirement in half and plant and water accordingly. You can also do this just for fun. If that concept of applying, let's say 7.5 gallons to a raised bed is too much for you, you can always divide mentally into quadrants or in half, whatever is easier for you to mentally do the math and say, okay, well, if I need to water this entire bed for 4 minutes, maybe I break this up into quadrants and only water 1 minute per general corner of this raised bed, right? So just whatever makes it easier for you mentally to manage to make sure that you're applying enough water to the space. Another important note for watering is that you want to ensure even distribution over very large areas. So if you have an area, you don't want to dump all of that water into just the center or just in one little spot. You actually want to go back and forth with the hose to make sure that all areas are getting an even distribution of water. And also another thing too, when it comes to plants, you always want to allow for deep soaking rather than sprinkling. So just spraying the leaves of the plants isn't really going to do much for it. That water really does need to get down deep into the roots. And the more you can actually provide a soaking environment, the more the roots will be encouraged to grow downwards and actually be healthier, as opposed to growing a bunch of shallow roots to try to pick up all that water that's only reaching the surface. And also another tip is that watering is more effective when you can actually allow that water to percolate in. So when a soil is first, basically when you first wet the soil, a lot of that is going to run off immediately. So generally a good practice is that if you can get the area wet first and allow it to to percolate in, it'll allow it to absorb more water, later on. So one good tip is that basically you can maybe, start off with an area and do an initial sprinkle and then go do your other areas and come back to it and do the rest of your watering, and that'll actually allow it to absorb more water. So that's another tip that you can use for your home gardening as well. And also in terms of timing, watering is also way more effective in early mornings, kind of the evening times, but just not the peak of the day. Because what happens is that if you water during the ultimate peak of the day, a lot of that water just evaporates right away before the plant can get to it. But again, some water is better than none. So if that's literally the only time you have to water, still do it because you don't want that plant to just fry to death just because you couldn't hit that peak watering time. But if you can schedule your times to make sure that you're a little bit earlier, a little bit later, that'll help a lot. And especially during extreme heat events, you definitely want to make sure that that plant always has enough water available to it if you don't want all your plants to fry, essentially, especially when the weather is changing. And again, targeting the roots is good for the plant, not just because it's healthier for the plant, but it also avoids mildew issues if you focus your watering down by the roots as opposed to just continuously sprinkling it down like a shower on top of the leaves themselves. The leaves will actually start to form mildew issues if they get too much moisture on the surface. So you really, again, want to try to get down low and try to get down into those roots when you're watering in your garden or at the Campus Urban Farm. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and hopefully you're really successful in your watering at the Campus Urban Farm. Thanks so much.